Hello and welcome to the 6-Star Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Aveline Clarke, and you're about to listen to another incredible episode with an amazing human all about how they are making a difference in the world using their passion, their purpose, and the alignment of their genius. Because I believe that we make the greatest impact in our life when we combine our passion with our purpose and our genius. That's where the magic happens. This conversation is going to be good because they always are. There's so much to gain from these. They're beautiful, they're inspiring, and I invite you to open up to see the possibilities of what you can do in your life too. Enjoy. Hello and welcome. It is another episode of 6-Star Leaders podcast. I am your host, Aveline Clarke. I am so excited. My guest today is the wonderful Marti Spiegelman. Marti holds a BA in biochemistry from Harvard University. She has a master's in graphic design from the Yale School of Art and Architecture and has advanced training in neurophysiology, psychology, and anthropology. She has an executive mentoring and initiation programs, one called Foundations of Precision Consciousness and the Shaman's Light Initiation and Mentoring Program. These are dedicated to helping today's change makers and visionaries across all professions embody and apply the timeless indigenous wisdom to the evolution of consciousness and thriving in today's world. She's also a co-founder with Todd Hoskins of the Leading from Being podcast and leadership training. She was a presenter at TEDx Berkeley 2011 and is widely known for her work in weaving indigenous principles of consciousness with modern genius to ignite quantum leaps in the ways that we live, work, and create together. Wow, I am in great company here. Welcome, Marti, to the show.
Thank you so much, Av. It's really great to be with you always.
Lovely to have you. Well, just hearing that, I'm honoured and excited to have this conversation with you because given that you've done so much and what you're doing is also so fascinating and unique, and I'm sure the listeners are now intrigued as to the path because of the studies that you've done already, and their minds might be going, hang on, how did she go from doing design and now doing this shamanic kind of consciousness work? Where's that path? But we're going to dig into that and so that all of that journey and that beauty comes out. Let's get started. Whereabouts are you in the world, Marti?
I'm in California, and I'm about an hour and a half north of San Francisco. So I'm in apple orchard country, which I absolutely love, kind of on the edge of the wineries, but I still have beautiful forest and wild meadows around. So, so West Coast of North America.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. That sounds beautiful. So tell me, in a nutshell, who do you serve and how do you serve them?
I serve people who are change makers. I'll put it that way. And these are people who may not even realize that they're change makers, but imagine you're an adult professional. You've gained some maturity, you've done some work in life, you've investigated your own inner healing, and you've gotten some stuff, and you're kind of okay, but you've got this itch inside you that you can't quite scratch because you know there's something else, something you don't know yet, something you could do yet, a way to make the world better, a way to use your gift, and you just can't find anybody who understands you. But you are dedicated. And you want to go deeper and you want to find out. And you might be kind of interested in indigenous knowledge because you think, well, maybe that's a route. But every person you talk to over there, that's not quite right either. You're my person. You are my person. You are a change maker. You've got that vision. You've got that desire in you to open up. And you don't even know what it is, but you want it anyway. So these are the change makers, the people who are at the leading edge of change and curiosity and creativity in our world. It's not about knowing ahead what you're going to do and how you get from A to B, because that's a very limited dimension of our consciousness. It's really about, okay, I'm going to dive in and I don't need to know how it works beforehand. So those are the people.
Yeah. And how do you serve them? I guess you've kind of already answered it, haven't you? But I'll let you explain it in your words.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the process in coming to work with me, it's initially what we're doing, and maybe this is what we do the whole time, but we're initially doing a kind of walkabout of human consciousness. We start by waking up our sensing intelligence. And so it might seem in the first year of training that I'm not serving anybody at all. I'm just saying, oh, here's another dimension of being human. You need to open it up and have some new experiences, and let's see what happens. But the service is that this is the key to cracking open our full consciousness, our sensing intelligence, not our thinking, not our strategizing, but our sensing intelligence. And this is most of us. So I don't often talk about serving people because it's a co-created event when I'm working with my training groups. But essentially the service is helping people open their consciousness so they simultaneously find themselves in the world. They know the world differently and they find out the world already knows them. So it's a complete blossoming. Yeah. So that's that's kind of the overview. But then as we go deeper in the process that I take people through, there is an initiation process in my in-depth training program. And so that consciousness that we first blossom, it gets strengthened and it gets connected into dimensions of the world that we live in that are very, very powerful, but maybe not visible to the ordinary eye. So we're doing advanced work with consciousness, with creativity, with growing a sense of self and discovering our belonging in the world. In fact, I think if I go back a few paragraphs here, the first thing that people say to me in the first chunk of work is, I feel like I've come home to myself. So the very first service, can you imagine if we all experience belonging where we are in life, belonging to the land where we live? This is one of the biggest healings that needs to happen in the human species, is remembering that belonging. And when you open consciousness, that's the first thing you get. You might want to change the world, but the first thing you get is your own taproot. And from that taproot, you start to blossom. And that's a huge service. And from that, there's an experience of membership in life, way beyond humans. We belong to all the species, to all the rivers and the mountains and the oceans and deserts, and we belong to that whole thing. So once we have that experience and we've got that taproot and we realize we're blossoming, the rest of it gets delivered. The thing that you've got in your heart, God, I wish I could create, I don't even know what, it comes into your awareness. And so then we use all the wisdom of indigenous cultures and principles of consciousness for each unique person to blossom what's coming through them. And so there's a huge service, if you will, in terms of increasing creativity, increasing how the people who work with me serve their people, their clients, their IUs, their families. So it's a multiplicity of effect.
Yeah, wow. It's just fascinating. I love what you do, Marti, and I'm so excited about getting further into this conversation. So before we get stuck in, what do you enjoy doing when you're not busy serving people and doing this amazing work?
Oh, this is a wonderful question because people have all these assumptions about me since I work in indigenous lineages and I must be so correct and proper and spiritual. And quite frankly, I love to cook. I love wine, as do my neighbors. So we have a whole wine thing going on in the neighborhood. I love to work out. I'm a runner and a swimmer and a kayaker and a hiker and pretty much everything. And I love being in the absolute utter wilderness. One of my favorite things are trips in the Arctic where we get flown up into the Arctic Circle and dropped on a riverbank with our gear, just 6 or 8 of us, and the plane flies away, and we have 2 glorious weeks in the tundra with nothing but sky and land and wild animals. And I love that, but I also love lying on beaches. So I kind of like the center of the planet where it's tropical, and I like the poles where you have extremes of night and day and extremes of temperature. So those are the things I love to do when I'm not doing my work. Yeah. And I actually think that being in the wilderness is what started to crack me open. So that it's important. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That's real nature, right? What you've just described. It's probably not something that many people listening to this have ever experienced.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting if we can do this little sidebar that all the traditions say that humans need to be in relationship with nature. Humans must be living in relationship to nature. And we have so many people on the planet, and there are literally so many people who will never get a chance to be in nature just because there's too many of us. But my response to that is, I think everyone can find a seed and put it in a little cup with some soil and grow it. And if you don't even have a cup, put it in the soil of Mother Earth and tend the seed into a blossoming stage. That tiny little connection to nature, it'll change your heart and soul. It'll change everything. Yeah.
So now, Marti, I'd love to know about the journey. And I'm sure the listeners are thinking, how did she get from where she started to doing this? Like it feels like a massive, weird, interesting journey. So tell me as much or as little as you'd like to share, but what has been the journey that's brought you to doing this and where you are today?
It has been massive and weird and wonderful in a lot of ways. And I actually love to tell the story because I think it provides some comfort to people who are in a similar process and don't realize it, right? Because we live in a world where you're supposed to know and you're supposed to plan ahead, and you sit in the career planning office at university and they say these 10 things and off you go. Well, life doesn't really work that way. And so I began long time ago. As a little kid, one of my big memories was lying in bed at night in the total darkness, trying to imagine my way to the edge of the universe. And this was my silent little rebellion, because otherwise I was very proper and I tried to obey everything and I never felt I was good enough, all those things that we all struggle with. But at night I was free, right? And so I tried to imagine my way to the edge of the universe. And everybody said there's an edge. And so I'd get there in my imagination and there'd be like this membrane. And then I tried to imagine nothing, because if there's an edge, there's supposed to be nothing beyond it. That's what they all said. I couldn't imagine nothing. And so I would always take my little fist and punch through the membrane and there would be more universe. And I would do this night after night after night. And I think this is like an anchor I had to the heavens, if I can put it in the, indigenous kind of terms. But I did that and then I forgot about it. And I grew up and I was like this and very shy. And my dad was a fairly famous scientist, so I knew science. And I used to sit around and listen to the scientists talk in the evenings. And they were, in my dad's generation, they were visionaries. They weren't so like, I don't know. Today, I think science is just too rigid and we just had an experience. Now we have to prove we had it. These guys, they would imagine and vision and plan experiments around that. And you could say science still does that, but they were freer. I thought they were more powerful and more amazing. So that fed me somehow, somewhere in my childhood. But science was all I knew, right? And so I kind of make my way through high school somehow. And somehow I get accepted to Harvard University. Now, in my family, going to Harvard and Caltech and Stanford was like having cornflakes for breakfast. That's a very American expression, but you get what I mean. It was ordinary for us. We didn't apply to any other places. So, so somehow I got in, and I did a biochemistry degree because I didn't know anything else. And I go plodding through my years at Harvard, every year gradually realizing that I really didn't like my peers. The other people my age who were studying to be scientists, I was realizing these people are not my friends. A whole adulthood with this kind of person around me. It was, Buddha forgive me, but I started to realize that science wasn't my thing. And of course, I'm in this big university where everybody knows my last name and everybody's watching carefully. And then one day, just because I had a friend who was an English major and she was taking this course called graphic design, I got up my courage one day and I went to see the design teacher, who was a wonderful Japanese guy, Toshihiro Katayama. And he'd been in the States forever, but he still could barely speak English, and he had all the beautiful Japanese gestures. And I go into his office stammering, trying to ask, can I take your course? I haven't done any design here at all. Please, can I take your course? He's listening to me like literally like this. And he's listening very intently and nodding. And he's got his hands like this. And I finally realized I should shut up. And so I'm sitting there quaking a little bit. And Toshi says to me, he says, and this is literally what he said. I don't mean this in an offensive way. He literally said to me, he said, so. All you need is to want. All you need is to want. Yeah. So I took Toshi's course and I dropped every other science course I didn't need to take to get a degree. That's right. And I took art history and I took drawing and I took, architecture history was also something that impacted me greatly. It was a course on how humans live on the land and why they build the structures they build. Just very important for what I do now. So I had these two, it's like me sprouting in a few gardens. And I surprisingly did fairly well in graphic design, and I did fairly well in architecture history. So I had two courses, right? And I applied to Yale Design School because my friend did. And I wanted to leave science and I didn't know where else to go. And so I'm sitting, where it's in the Ivy League bubble and you only know certain names. And so design school, that looks good. And I'm applying for one of 12 spots with 300 applicants and my portfolio is this thick. And somehow I got in. So, yes, boss. So I dove in and I really learned as much as I could. I was terrified the whole time, but I dove in and I got my MFA. And from there, what else do you do? But you go someplace you like to live with friends who are also moving there. Some of us moved from the East Coast to San Francisco, and you try to make a business, right? So in those days, I was also doing a lot of cooking. So I moved with my cooking friends to the sunny West Coast, and I started my design business. And gradually, I got very good at it. And gradually, I realized all the things that I learned in design school. And I was very, very successful until it was about 20 years, until the U.S. economy tanked. This is sort of the mid-'80s. And I had started to do magazine design. So I had the privilege of doing Macworld magazine and working with the Macintosh before it was on the market. So I basically helped to bring the computer onto the market as a design tool before desktop publishing was invented. So we were just having a blast, right? And everything was really, really great. And then all the design firms had these silly little slow computers in their offices and the economy tanks. So new technology is a disruptor, right? In the design business, when the economy tanks, the design budgets are the first to go. So the clients were stressed, angry. Don't you have those computers that do everything? And it got harder and harder and harder and less pleasurable to do design. And so I still, every time I tell the story, I still can't believe I did this. One day I quit. I walked into the office and all my employees were handing their phones out to me like this. There's a client. I don't know what to do with them. Please help. It's like 5 phones. Right? And that's the day I quit. So I had to kind of wind down my business, and I handed the clients off to my staff, and I said, be freelance. Don't make it complicated. And because I live in California, what we do when we have a midlife crisis here on the West Coast is we go get some energy healing. So I went off to get a whole bunch of energy healing. And one of these people that I was getting healings from, a Scottish fellow who taught visionary craniosacral work, he said to me, you ought to study with me. And I went, what? No, I'm a designer. What? No, I'm an intellectual. What do you mean? So after a year of badgering, I actually finally took a course with him. And the very first hour of being in a classroom with him doing introductory energy exercises, he and I both realized that I already knew how to do the work. And I don't know where that came from, but I had it somehow in my hands and my awareness. And so I studied with him and I taught for him, and then I developed my own cranial program. And while I was teaching cranial work, somebody said to me, gee, Marti, how do you know all this stuff, this energy stuff? And I said, well, why don't we do a visionary skills course? And I didn't even know what visionary skills was. I just said it. So these things are pouring out of me. So I developed a course. I just made it up on the spot, and I started teaching visionary skills in addition to cranial work. And I was having a lot of fun, and I wasn't very busy. And so in this time, here's the magic. During this time, I got in my regular mailbox, printed mail. Remember that? I got invitations to work with indigenous masters on 3 different continents. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how they found me. But it looked really cool, and I wasn't very busy, so I said yes to everything. And I kept doing my thing, and then I traveled and I worked with these people. And within a year, I had my first levels of initiation in indigenous traditions. And whatever I received, I brought home and I taught. I never questioned that. I just kept going. And so every day, teaching what I was learning, that really embedded the knowledge in me more deeply. And it just grew and grew and grew. And it grew into what I do now, which is really helping to open people's consciousness. Because along the way, I realized that this business people talk about, shamans and indigenous wisdom. And I really even stumble over the word indigenous because it's our word for them. And we forget that we are indigenous. We have a 2 million year old self, as Anthony Stevens says in his book by the same name. We are indigenous. We came from somewhere. We have to say where our taproot is, what we belong to, what we stand for. Yeah, that's really what's in the way why a lot of elders won't share their wisdom, because we don't have a root. We don't have a taproot, and the wisdom will just spill out and be wasted. Yeah. But what I realized is in indigenous cultures, as I was learning all these things, is that this thing we call shamanism is not sort of fancy woo-woo weird stuff. The so-called shamans were the keepers of the consciousness of their people. And consciousness is the living universe. There's a big consciousness, and it speaks everything into being. All of the stars and the galaxies and the comets and the black holes and everything, all the planets, all the life on this planet, every human, every jaguar, every wallaby, everything is consciousness on the move. And if you have an elder in your community who knows literally the technologies, the physics of consciousness, who can track energies, then that person tends the energy flow in the consciousness of the village, of the culture, and people do okay. And thriving is possible. And if a disaster happens, they know how to go with the energies of change instead of fighting them. And people recover faster. And this is how humans used to live. Now we say we lived in relationship to nature, but actually we lived in relationship to the big consciousness, which is always informing us. so that was my big ping. And gradually you start out by transmitting what you get. So the early years of the initiation program, I was kind of copying what I went through because I didn't know anything else and it was valuable. But what's grown out of that, and this is very important, is all of my conversations with the elders about my realizations about modern consciousness, modern awareness, and these principles of consciousness. They've said to me, and I've shared with them what I've learned, consciousness is what it is. It doesn't change. It works the same way at all scales simultaneously. What it produces is different from one age to the next. And so the elders who have initiated me, actually most of them have passed away and their worlds are passing away, but they have all said to me, here's the technology. Don't change the technology, but discover how it works in your world. It produces different things in our world because our world is different. We have different dynamics, different ingredients, different people. And so this is really the thing that I do is help people understand consciousness in the world we have for our times, for our evolution. And one of the most beautiful things, I'm going to loop all the way back now, is if I remember myself as a little kid punching through the membrane around the universe, we need that kind of curiosity. You have to be able to not question yourself, but play, explore. What if something's different than I think? Play with it and find out. And you also have to understand that there are some things like physics, some things just are. So I can talk about consciousness with people in terms of science and neurophysiology. And, in physics, a plus charge is always a plus charge. In neurophysiology, some things our bodies work the way they work. So there's some things that are given, and then there are how those given things produce evolution. So I use my science, I use my childhood visioning, design, graphic design in particular is the art and technology of making information visible. Yeah. And consciousness, most of consciousness is invisible, right? And yet humans, we have an incredible capacity to track, to be aware of, to see, if you will, to see energy and to engage the invisible world in order to manifest the visible world. And so I use everything that I gathered along my crazy zigzag path. It all converged one moment when I realized, this is all about consciousness, and this is what I'm here to give people. And one of the reasons I love to tell this story is that a lot of people who come to work with me are giving up one profession and trying to find the next thing to do. And that's something I have some experience with. And quite frankly, the best thing to do is to really stop listening to yourself and start listening to the universe. What's being delivered to your doorstep? And if it comes and it looks kind of cool, just say yes. Because that's the universe giving you the next piece. And that's how consciousness works. So that's how I got to where I am now.
Oh, wow, Marti, what a story. What a story. Man, when you got those invitations in your mailbox from these indigenous elders, like where were they from? What parts of the world were they from?
There was one from somebody who was taking people to the Himalayas, to Nepal, in fact, to work with the Tamang and Magar elders, and also with the Tibetan Pals who were living in exile in Nepal. And there was one for South America, for Peru in particular, and then one for West Africa. So very, very different cultures, and yet there is a similarity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And did these invitations come pretty close together, like around the same time?
Blam, blam, blam. really, the same time.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How fascinating. And where did you go first?
I don't remember. I think, how did this work? No, actually, there was a fourth one. Let me think about this. I think I went first to Peru. I think there was a fourth one to central Mexico to work with a Withdrawal elder. And on the way back from that trip, I met the fellow who was the contact for the shamans in the Himalayas. And then I think the third one was my wonderful African mentor and colleague, Malidoma Somé. Mm-hmm. So I think it was that order. But it really was kind of all together. Yeah.
And I'm assuming when you went and worked with them or spent time with them, there were others like you that were called, shall we say, or
what I
tapped
found
on the shoulder.
Yeah, what I found is that there were others, but this is one. I think it was the next stage of me really realizing what's wrong with Western consciousness. It might be, but the first time I realized something was going on in Western consciousness was when I left biochemistry. I was sitting at Harvard thinking, these aren't my people. They think differently. There's something limited. And in those early days when shamanism was the big, marquee and flashing lights, a lot of people came who were really seeking something different. But I think even in those days noticed that in Western consciousness in general, our awareness is very, very limited. So they were looking for a reality to match their inner fantasy, and they actually were unable to connect with what was really going on. And just because of this crazy path I'd been on, I had in particular a lot of training in energy by that time. And so I was able to track what the elders were saying at the level of energy. And the rest of the people seemed to be looking for some foreign magical thing to match their inner fantasy. And I'm not saying this critically. I'm talking about a key missing piece in Western consciousness. And this really is the core of the work I do, especially at the beginning, is what are we doing with our awareness? Where is it? What do we allow ourselves to be aware of? Are we living where everything is about us, like a self-referential state, which is everything's about our ego structure and our identity? Or do we have a connection into the world that's more informative, more of a two-way street, more where we are more a member of the world than an individual trying to hang on to our tiny little identity? That we really use awareness in a very, very different way in the modern world. And I started to notice that from the get-go with even people who were hungry for something different. The missing ingredient was how we use awareness. And I've had long conversations with the elders over all these years about this, and they all agree. And I think Malidoma Somé was the first one that I met who really understood, who saw for himself that Western people are different. And this piece of awareness training, it's actually, if we were all quote unquote indigenous, it's what indigenous people do for their children from the get-go. You get taken into the forest to learn all the respect names of the trees and the birds and all the little creatures. You're put into the world and taught to put your awareness on the world. So the world knows you and you know the world. Yeah. But we don't do that in modern culture. And by the time you get to adulthood and you realize, oh God, there's something else. What is it? I have to have it. Your awareness is looped around your own ego structure. And that's tied to emotions. And that's tied to a whole bunch of limbic attunements and energy patternings. And we get to the place where we can't really even distinguish our emotional response to a thing from the thing. And so modern people, however hungry we are, we have a lot of very serious, tender deep work to do with awareness before we can understand what the rest of all that shamanic stuff is actually about, what consciousness is actually about.
There's a lot there. You mentioned earlier in your story that when you got your first sort of, you have a memory of one of your elders talking to you about awareness and consciousness, and that the technologies remain the same. Mm-hmm. However, over time, the impact or the output of the consciousness is different.
Mm-hmm.
My question is that due to something more spiritual, more out there? That is it about the evolution of the planet and where it's at and therefore the consciousness is creating it's something more evolutionary. It's changing, because we're always changing, right? Mm-hmm. So is my understanding of that correct? And that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really good thing to talk about. A really simple example, I hope it's not too simple, but a really simple example is if we were living in a little village in the Andes, in our stone huts, and our wealth was expressed in terms of the size of our alpaca herd, and we had a few crops that we grew 1,000 feet down the mountain. We're living at a certain scale, and we're living in relationship to certain powers. So if I embody some of these principles, or I sometimes call them technologies of consciousness, if I embody the principle of presence and the principle of full awareness, what I'm going to produce in my small scale village is I'm going to make myself known as a member, a functional member of the village. I will be feeding my energetic relationships with everyone and everything quite visibly. My heart will be open, and everyone else in the village has embodied these principles. And so I get a 1,000% response. And we're all living in relationship to the land, to the alpaca herd, and to our crops 1,000 feet down the mountain, because that's the way we stay alive. And so if I embody the principles, one of the principles, the old Quechua word is munai, and it means to love. But the principle itself means the capacity to be aware of everything as it is, with absolutely no agenda whatsoever. Just be aware. Nothing to do, no reaction, no nothing. It's just, this is the world as it is. And it's like the presence and this kind of awareness are two sides of a coin. So if I'm in that little village and I am organized by these two principles of presence and that massive principle of collective love, if you will, I radiate out those energies, and I'm living at a scale where my energies affect my entire village. And so I get a village that's healthier, and everybody's in this state, and we're working together. Even if a problem comes up, we solve it faster because we're organized by these principles. Okay, now let's come to, I don't know, how big is Sydney? Or Melbourne, or let's come to a big city. Imagine yourself in a big city. Yep. And you are a really good student, and you've really got your awareness trained, and you're embodying these principles, and you're organized by presence and this principle munai, and you beam it out in the world, and the city's still a mess. Yep. In the world that we live in, the principles still work, but what they can reach and what it will look like is going to be radically different. The streets won't be immediately all cleaned up throughout all of Sydney or Manhattan. There will be a difference in the whatever geography our energies reach, we will make an effect. But that effect will look a little different. And it will take within the realm of time and space, it will take a different path to expression. Yeah. Take my, even my neighborhood here, which is not very dense, but these are very Western people in my neighborhood. This is America, right? It's the countryside in California. And the years that I've been living on this property and having trainings here and doing my work here, organized by these principles, there has been a ripple effect. And it's taken several decades, but it's happening. If I have in my imagination, well, it should have happened right away. What's wrong? What's wrong? I'm off course. So I have to learn to be a better energy tracker than the elders who trained me. Modern people have to be better with consciousness than any indigenous master ever was, because our world is more complex, not complicated. It's more complex. There are more humans than there have ever been. So we're dealing with scale and complexity that's never been seen on the planet before. Yep. And so the principles are exactly the same, but what it looks like when this principle Moonlight takes hold, it's different. Western people respond more slowly. It's not as full and complete as our fantasy would have it, but we have to recognize those little green shoots that come up and tend to those and not mind the rest of it, because we can't fix it all. We just have to tend what is growing. So that's maybe an example that helps.
Thank you for that. I love this. I love the depth that we're going. Can you talk to me, explain the definition of taproot and how important that is for a person to understand or to get a hold of or to own? Yeah, the principle or the metaphor of the taproot, it's related to the symbol of the tree of life, which you'll find in all cultures. And you imagine yourself, and again, these are universal metaphors. You'll find them everywhere. But imagine that you are a seed. We're born. We come from seeds. We're born as a seed. And our job as a biological entity, if we come into this world, our job is to grow that seed, the seed of who we are, who we came here to be. And that metaphor of a seed, it's supposed to be planted in the earth. You think of indigenous cultures lived on land, and there's a lot of question now about whose land are we living on. I say to every Western person I meet, what land did your lineage come from? Also, what land was underneath you when you were born? That's the place you were planted, right? So you imagine yourself a seed in that land, and imagine that land speaking you into being. Your taproot is literally a connection into the earth, the planet, and all the energies and dynamics and wisdom the planet is. No, it's not just a thing. It's the planet Earth is a principle of consciousness. It's a dynamic that produces life, that lives through the process of change all the time, tectonic plates and earthquakes and storms and who knows what. It's always on the move. And this is where we come from, right? So we have that taproot, and then we grow, we send the root down and we grow up. We can't rise higher than that root is deep. You know, I have on my property different kinds of evergreen trees, and some of them have very shallow root systems and they blow over in the wind. They might get really big, but some big challenge comes and down they go, right? As a species, we need to get that taproot down into the earth, you know, in a metaphoric way, a mythic way, and literally be breathing earth energy into us. So that gives us a sense of not just belonging, but it's a literal energy source. It's really interesting. If this is new to our listeners, just go outside and put your bare feet on the ground, even if it's a little cutout piece on a sidewalk. It doesn't matter. Earth. Put your feet on the earth. And imagine, take a big breath in, but imagine you're breathing energy in from the earth through your feet up through the rest of your body. And do that 7 big breaths a day for a week and see how you feel. Okay, but now we're getting to another principle.
with the taproot, we can send the shoot up. And what does a little plant do? It makes a stem and some leaves and eventually a bud and a flower and maybe a fruit, or if not a fruit, at least seeds at some point. That's a cycle of blossoming. And those seeds come back to the ground and they get planted again, little root down, little shoot up. The next cycle of our blossoming, the next cycle of our blossoming. This is a principle of consciousness, germination and blossoming into states of fulfillment over and over and over. And that taproot is part of the tree of life, which is a symbol of continual germination and blossoming. And in the South American lineages, they understand that the skill is to have every stage of germination and blossoming happening all the time, always. So you're always deepening that taproot. You're always growing the main trunk of the tree that you are, always increasing your canopy, blossoming, making fruit, planting seeds. So there's never any scarcity, ever. And if one cycle's a little weaker, it doesn't matter because you got 10 other cycles going. And this isn't to complicate life. This is just to experience it. This is what nature's doing all the time anyway. You know, walk into a forest or a prairie or even a desert and you'll see all the stages of germination and blossoming happening all the time. This will not happen without a taproot. So one of the most important things that we can do as Western people, since the banks own the land, is, well, there's two things. Number one, it's very interesting, if you don't already know this, to do a little research. What culture did your immediate family originally come from? Right? Most of us in the U.S. came from European cultures. Find out where you actually came from and find out what that land is like. What's the geography and the geology of those earlier cultures? But then also literally the place you were born. What's that geography like? What's that earth like? Is it the earth of mountains that know how to rise up and stand tall and be an axis? Is it a desert where the vistas are so broad and wide that you've got visionary skill? You know, or is there an underneath layer that's volcanic? So you've got a big fire in your belly. It's a wonderful thing. Go research that because you are that. That land put a code into you, and those are your first gifts. And with that, we get that energetic taproot.
Mm.
So,
and what if you're born in a city, in a suburb of a city?
There's earth underneath. There's earth underneath. You know, I was once in Los Angeles for a weekend seminar, and I was walking down the street from my Bland Hotel to the Bland Conference Center, and it's nothing but concrete. It was Sunday, so the LA downtown was empty. And I'm walking, so feeling awfully depressed about all this concrete and steel and glass. I think I was apologizing to the earth. And I heard her say, "Don't worry, I'm fine." Underneath there, she's vibrant. There's look at the geology underneath the city. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I worked with somebody who was born in Paris, and underneath Paris, the geology underneath that city is amazing. Oh my God. And it was exactly the skill that this person had. Beautiful, beautiful dynamics and capacity to go deep and rise up fast. And oh, it was amazing. So we're interested in the earth, not the human-made stuff.
That's really, yeah. I mean, this is beautiful, Marti. You're sharing some really key things, and I'm sure it's quite different to what many of our listeners are used to, and yet I'm sure on some level the listeners are realizing, I guess, the importance of these very simple things, because what we can't deny and what everyone I'm sure understands is that we are connected to nature, we are part of nature, and like you said, we came from seed. So we need to see ourselves as the tree, our own tree of life. And we're only going to be able to be the full expression of ourselves in our work, in our life, and all the aspects of us, if we have the root system deep and full.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and nurtured, I think.
Yes.
Honored.
Yeah, nurtured. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm understanding.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Nurtured and honored. And so what do we feed ourselves? And you think about a tree, even if there's no other trees around, those roots are connected. Think of all the other things in the soil that feed a tree and all the other organisms that can't live without the tree and vice versa. And then as the tree comes up into our atmosphere, all the interrelations. Yeah. And so that deep taproot is also the experience of connecting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just so important. Yeah. So this is not about isolation. This is about connecting and realizing, not just nurturing ourselves, but realizing that those connections nurture us. Mm-hmm.
So, Marti, you're doing a really important role here by bringing these indigenous, the technologies of consciousness into the Western world. I'm not sure if there's other people like you who do this. I don't think I've ever asked you that before. That doesn't matter. But it feels very unique. It's really important on some level. My mind is sort of going, yes, we need to, break down the complexity of and the rigidity of our technologicalized, is that even a word, society and the way humans live today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm seeing that the work that you're doing is so, so important. I have a question for you. When did you realize that you were on purpose, as in that you were making, that it's like, this is what I'm here to do?
I was sitting in a cafe in the square of a little town called Pisac in the Sacred Valley of Peru, having a cappuccino with my friend when I got this download that I wasn't here to be an energy healer. I wasn't here to be just a commercial graphic designer. I got the download that all of this wisdom is actually about consciousness, and it needs to be brought to the very places in the modern world where we are creating, exchanging, and distributing what we call value. Because this is one of the big things that consciousness does. Consciousness, when it's on the move, is generating stuff. It doesn't just make a static thing. Whatever consciousness grows, that thing has extra energy to feed more. There's a multiplicity of return every time a plant blossoms, every time a forest is successful. And where do we create, exchange, and distribute value? Business. We should be doing that also in governance. We should be doing that also in social well-being, in education. But I realized, boy, this is for the modern world. This is it. This is why I have learned all these other crazy things like science and design and energy healing, and God only knows what else I learned, so I could understand consciousness for the modern world and bring it right to where we need it, to the place we're trying to control the world, which really mostly is business, because business mostly runs government and everything else. I mean, even healthcare is a business. So yes, it was in the little town of Pisac on the corner with my good friend having cappuccinos. So you don't have to go on a harsh vision quest to get your download. Yeah, that was the moment.
You just have to be ready.
I think you have to not be ready. You have to be
love it, Marti. Yeah,
relaxed, and who knows? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So true. So true. Yeah. And not filling the mind with other stuff, but literally having the mind empty so that you are
mm-hmm.
able to come in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
What would you say, Marti, is your superpower or your genius?
I'm not quite sure. I think what I would answer might not be what somebody else would say about me. I think what it is, I have a colleague who calls this good protoplasm. And so I don't really have a name for it, but I think what it is a sense that I've always had, and I have no idea how this survived in me, given everything that I've lived through, a sense that humans are fundamentally extraordinary. And it's worth our finding out that truth. That we are fundamentally extraordinary and an extraordinary part of the conscious universe. We have an amazing role to play. I have always believed in it. Every time I've seen humans behave poorly, viciously, stupidly, we have got a whole list of bad words we could use. There's something in me goes, why? Why don't they realize what goes wrong in human consciousness that we're so close to falling off our own rails? And sometimes I think about, it may be kind of sad that I learned some neurophysiology, because I think about our neurophysiology design and I get a little ticked off sometimes because some of the ways that we process information in our physical sensing system is a little screwy to my way of thinking. But, I think about humans. We are so powerful and we're so fragile. And we have such an important role in the universe. And I think what my colleague calls good protoplasm, it's this place that lives in me that will never give up that knowing that we're precious and we deserve to be fully conscious. We deserve love. We deserve to be okay in our own skin. And that's worth fighting for. So it's that inner sense, and it's not biological or genetic or anything. It's like protoplasm to me is something that's across all the species. It's something in consciousness itself. I think that's it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Only you could give me that answer, Marti. It's gorgeous. What does 6-star? What does being 6-star mean to you?
Oh, 6-star means the world to me. I think that 6-star itself, it was such a brilliant inspiration from you, such a brilliant download. To me, 6-star means so many things, but I'll say first, it means breaking out of old ideas of what's good. 6-star is becoming all the stars of the universe. 6-star is unlimited skill development, unlimited love, unlimited connection for the greatest possible benefit and good that we could create, and then some. 6-star is taking off all the constraints and all the limits and saying, let's be really who we are and let's produce what we can produce, because we're good, we're beautiful, we're talented, and that's what we're here for. That's 6-star.
Wow. Love it. Love that answer. Well, just brings warmth inside, Marti. I love the way you describe things, and the language you use is just so beautiful and eloquent and powerful. So I realize the time, and I could keep talking to you for another hour, but I realize we can't do that, unfortunately. So I just want to quickly segue, kind of loop back and ask you to just give us a description of how the work that you do with people helps someone in business. Okay, thinking about our audience, and they're obviously looking to do business differently. They want to be more purposeful and impactful, and they've just learnt everything in this last 50 minutes or whatever it is, and their mind's blown, and they're like, but how does this actually help me or help others? What's the benefit? How does this change my world? Can you speak to that for just a few minutes? I'd be really grateful.
Yeah. Imagine for a moment that you're a business person and you're doing your thing and you know how to do your thing. And it works. It's okay. It's great. But you have this kind of a flash of a vision or this momentary feeling that there's another dimension, that there's a completely different way to do what you do, and it would be more impactful. You just get that feeling. No. So now imagine that instead of, if I want to do something in business, I'm here, and the way we do it in our world is I'm here and I have to get there. Right? So what do I have to do? I have to strategize. I have to make a plan. And I go from A to B to C to A to B to C. Whatever I do, I have to get from here to there. And you could do that. You could strategize. But you are creating a kind of solid idea over here that's guiding your action. So your experience is in your plan. And it's withdrawing from your daily experience, withdrawing a lot of awareness. You're not actually tracking what's literally happening. You're tracking it relative to something you created a year ago, a week ago, something. So business, the way we do it in the ordinary world, is limited to getting from here to there. It's limited to comparing what's happening to a plan I made a while ago. It kind of operates in two dimensions. And it's always here to there. Am I there yet? Am I there yet? Am I there yet? So I end up measuring a lot and judging a lot. And that can seep into me. So I end up measuring myself and judging myself. Is this good enough? Is this, that stuff we fall into. Okay. So imagine instead you turn into a creative conduit. No. And you don't have to do anything or go anywhere or get anywhere or measure anything. You begin to use your awareness and you begin to process information in a lot of different dimensions. And you imagine that you're reaching out into the universe in all these different dimensions, collecting all kinds of different data that you couldn't even see before, knowing the world in ways you couldn't even know before. You're still doing your work, whatever that is, putting your product out or your service out, but you're knowing a lot more about it all of a sudden. Whoa, that's pretty amazing. And then you learn, I'm going to do this metaphorically, that the universe is flowing through you and helping you organize all those data bits to produce multiple expressions of what you know how to do. So you can do exactly what you do better and better and better every day. And you have multiplicities of ways that you do that. And if you want, you can reach more people, or if you want, you can give more kinds of things to a niche audience. You're processing information differently, and you're not figuring it out before it happens. You live by being the conduit of creativity. You cease to worry. Is this good enough? Will this work? Will this not work? Because the universe, moment to moment, is giving you exactly what you need to create exactly what you need in that moment. And here's the thing about it. The only way this works is if you really find and make relationship with your gift. So the gift, who you are as a person, a talented person, becomes your continuity, not your daily question. It becomes your continuity. And from that continuity, you can create this kind of thing and that kind of thing and that kind of thing. And so you start to feel not just your taproot, but some security, because you know who you are and you know that that continuity is what drives your own evolution. So you actually cease to need to-do lists. You cease to stress about, oh God, I didn't plan it. Oh my God. You will be more organic in everything that you do. I have one fellow who's been a business consultant for a long time, and he's finally relaxing into letting, if you will, the universe flow through him. So when he's advising business groups, he doesn't have something set. He walks in and the people are the work. And it's much richer and much more powerful because his consciousness, his awareness is working differently. So it's more dimensional, it's more fluid, it's richer, and in the moment produces more moment to moment. So it's like going from a 2-dimensional world to a 10-dimensional world. And instead of knowing things via causality and explanation, you know things as they are experientially through all their dimensions, and you can pick whatever dimension is best for you, and the universe helps you know that. It takes the weight of the world off your ego structure, off your own shoulders. It increases your creativity by orders of magnitude. It increases your health because your body starts to relax, and it's just healthier when you're more in parasympathetic dominance. You have a better sense of self. Your relationships improve. These are all pieces of feedback that I get from people who work with me. And also business, whatever you thought your business was, it finally gets clear. And you start doing it in a way that works for you instead of you working for it. Because it's natural, because that's what consciousness does. Yeah. So it's all the things that we think we're looking for, but we can't think our way there. Instead of trying to think up the world and figure it out before we take a step, we learn experientially. We finally wake up in our biggest gift, which is experiential learning. That's where we learn, and that's where we create, and it happens at the speed of light. So the whole issue of time goes away. It's pretty much everything you're looking for. But I think ultimately,
that's
if
so
we boil that down, it's very exciting. Yeah. And I think that the getting free of causality and judgment and measurement, and waking up in a very free and very empowered state of consciousness, where you have the principles of consciousness guiding you, not somebody else's system. Yeah, you make your own systems. Yeah, you make your own connections.
And I do. Yeah. I love that, Marti. And I really truly believe that humanity is ready for this, and more and more people that I speak to on this podcast, in business, and just in meeting them, are identifying these systems that don't work, the old structures, the competitive nature, the ego judgment, measurement, all these things that haven't served us and are causing these flow-on effects, and they're realizing that actually this doesn't work. So I feel like we're ready for this to come into our world, and it just takes the first brave souls to be open and ready and take the first step, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said. Yeah, because it is different, and we need to do different things. Yeah.
Well, Marti, this is exciting. How can someone get started? Is there a way that they can learn some things? Is there a course that you have, or I know you've got programs and you work with groups and one-on-one, but is there something you can recommend someone can start with?
Yeah, there are actually two things. One, just for a quick toe dip, I have a TEDx talk, which you can find on YouTube. Just Google Marti Spiegelman TEDx, and you'll find me pretty easily. So that's 22 minutes of me talking. I'm one of the few people who is allowed to go over time at TEDx. So that's my claim to fame. So that's.
Why were you allowed to, Marti?
Well, I think they just liked what I was saying. They were going to cut me off, and somebody backstage said, "No, let her keep talking." And the timer wasn't working, and how much time I took. But anyway, it's a lovely, slightly long TEDx talk. And that gives a nice overview. But I also have an audio program, and I love that it's audio. You can take it wherever you go and listen to it as you want. And it's called Foundations of Precision Consciousness. And you can get that online. Can we post the link to that when this is posted? Yep. So it's Foundations of Precision Consciousness, and
Okay. Yeah. We'll have the link to the TEDx talk and that, in the show notes.
Yeah, fabulous. So those are really good ways to just hear me discussing the principles, and there are lots of examples, and there are in the Foundations of Precision Consciousness, there are exercises you can try. So that's a lovely way to kind of ease into a different worldview and have some new experiences yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then also people can always email me if you have a question.
That's perfect. Yeah.
And that's really simple. It's Marti Spiegelman at mac.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. We'll have all the details somewhere below this audio or the video, however you're watching or listening. You can reach out and get in touch with Marti, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. Marti, I've so loved our time together, as I always do. You are so dear to me. But I am going to ask you one more question, by the way. You're not leaving just yet. There is one more little thing I'd love to get from you, and that is, can you leave our listeners with a little tidbit or a little nugget or something for them to do today?
Yeah. The little nugget is find a time to step outside your door and notice the very, very first thing in nature that captures your attention. You really have to notice what grabs your attention, not the other way around. A thing in nature, not the wind, because that's more complicated. That's advanced work. A thing in nature. Maybe it's a tree, it's a leaf, it's a bird hopping on the ground, something in nature that has grabbed your attention. And then I want you to feel the nature of that thing, because it's reflecting to you something beautiful about your true nature. So let your imagination go to work, let your senses go to work, and try that out.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to do that after this myself. Marti, I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for your journey and for you being here on this planet at this time and being in my world and being part of Six Star. And the work you do is it's not just powerful, it's just really unique, and it's so needed. It's really needed. And I'm really honored that you're my friend, and thank you for being here and being you.
My pleasure, Av. Thank you so much. You are a treasure in my life, and it is an honor to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I did in hosting it. So please rate, review, and leave us a comment below. And finally, also, I'd love you to share it with a friend, someone who you think would get something positive from it, someone who would enjoy it. We're here for each other, so please share the love. If you'd like to reach out and talk to me and learn about how you can make a bigger difference in the world by serving the ideal clients that you have with purpose, please get in contact over at journeypoint.com.au. See you on the next episode of Six Star Leaders Podcast.